Now turn to part 3. You will hear 3 different talks or lectures. In each talk or lecture there are 5 questions. For each question, choose the correct answer A, B, C or D. You will hear the talks or lectures only once. Now open your questions paper and look at talk or lecture 1. You now have 35 seconds to look through the questions and the options in each question. Now we are ready to start. Listen carefully.
Dolls have always fascinated me, and that's why, 5 years ago, I was delighted to be offered the job of running a doll museum. Dolls have existed for thousands of years, and the earliest dolls we know about were found in graves in ancient Egypt. I only wish we could get 1 or 2 for our museum, but we haven't unfortunately got anything as old as that in the museum. All the same, we have got examples from Europe from the 12th century, but my favourite early dolls are actually from the 17th century. They interest me not just because they are early, or fairly early, but also because of the clothes they're wearing. They have their original clothes, and from them we know what the owners wore, since dolls in those days were always dressed like their owners. They were made of the only material readily available for things like this at the time, solid wood, and they were painted in great detail. In fact, on the best examples, like the ones in the museum, the detail includes the 17th century makeup. Dolls like these were very expensive then, and only the very rich could afford them. These days, they're popular with collectors, and if you want one today, you have to pay anything up to £10,000 for a doll in perfect condition from this time. By the way, what makes them so valuable is that, as far as a collector is concerned, a doll is only worth collecting if it is in perfect condition, and that means having the original clothes. Doll collecting has become very fashionable since the museum opened, with people interested in dolls from every period, including later dolls. There's great interest in 19th century examples, when dolls were no longer made of wood, but began to have soft bodies and real hair. They were very delicate, and few have survived, meaning such a doll would be worth about £2,000, perhaps a bit more. Later, in the 19th century, you could often take off the doll's hair. If you can often see the maker's name underneath, and of course, the right one increases a doll's value. There was a really big change in dolls at the beginning of the 20th century. In the museum, we have one of the earliest examples, from about 1909, of a doll that's a model of a baby. Previously, all dolls, the earlier ones, were little adults.
Now open your question paper and look at talk or lecture 2. You now have 35 seconds to look through the questions and the options in each question. Now we are ready to start. Listen carefully.
Hello, I'm Stephen Mills. I will travel with you on the Tiger Tour to India, but I'm not your tour guide. I work as an artist, and I'm going to take some photographs of tigers so that I can use them when I paint some pictures later. An expert guide will join the group when we arrive in India, but I'm leading the group until then. We leave London on the 6th of November, arriving in India the following day. It's a good time of year to visit the wildlife park where the tigers live. The rainy season finishes in October, and later in the year, the park gets more crowded and the tigers become shy. We'll spend 10 days in the wildlife park. There are 20 other types of animal and 300 types of bird to see, as well as tigers. There are 18 of us altogether, and everything is organised for our comfort by the tour company. For example, although we're in the jungle, we won't have to sleep in tents. The hotels where we'll stay are all very comfortable. To be sure of seeing tigers, we'll stay in 2 different parts of the wildlife park. We'll spend 3 days in the north, where we'll travel around in an open truck, and the rest of the time in the south, where we'll travel around on elephants. That should be fun. On the way back to London, we have dinner and one night's bed and breakfast in the Indian capital, Delhi. There you can either go sightseeing or go shopping, whichever you prefer. But please note that lunch is not provided on our day of departure, as the plane leaves at 2 in the afternoon. Now, if there are any questions, I'd like you...
Now open your question paper and look at Talk or Lecture 3. You now have 35 seconds to look through the questions and the options in each question. Now we are ready to start. Listen carefully.
For the second in our series about locally run businesses, we meet Simon Winridge, co-founder of the hugely successful Winridge Forest Railway Park. Welcome, Simon. Now, perhaps you can begin by telling us a little bit about how it all started.
Well, during the 1970s, my wife Liz and I had just acquired 80 acres of sheep farming land, and we decided to settle down and have children. Pretty soon we had a daughter, Sarah, and a son, Duncan. The place was wonderful for the kids. They particularly loved trains and gradually built up an enormous network of miniature railway track. I began to develop larger-scale models of locomotives, but we didn't think anything more of it until I went on a trip to a theme park near Birmingham and decided we could do a much better job. So we set up a small one ourselves, based on the miniature railway, and we opened to the public for just a month that year, 1984, in July, our driest month, because our children said they didn't want our guests to have a miserable wet visit. I dealt with park business and Liz carried on with the farm work. It soon became clear that we were onto a winner. We began to extend the railway track and lay it among more interesting landscape by planting trees, which in turn attracted more wildlife, and by making cuttings through the rock. Nowadays, we're open all year round, and we're pleased to say that Winridge is one of the most popular visitor attractions in the area, with 50,000 visitors a year. 1.5 million people have been through our doors since we opened.
That is the end of part 3. Now you have 5 minutes to check your answers and transfer your answers onto the answer sheet.